So what is human-centered design and why you should care? I wanted to just talk a little bit about that. There's all these different graphics that people have created about this is design thinking, this is human-centered design. They all look so fancy. In fact, there's a website, and I'm going to put it up, and I apologize if it offends anyone. I didn't create the title of it. But it's just full of all these different cool graphics of design thinking. And if you look at it, you'll quickly get jaded because it's like, it's just at a certain point it becomes silly, and they're sort of all the same. And of course, we have our very own at my work. This is our 6-phase process. But really the key, I'm going to pull out what I think are the keys for educators because I'm going to try to move quickly. So I just wrote this slide last night. I was trying to think about what are the key pieces of this process. The first is that it is a process. It just gives us a framework. Is it the best framework? Is it the only framework? No. But it is a framework that we can use to go through a process of creating something new. So we can take it and we can tweak it and we can flip it and we can bring in elements of critical pedagogy that we really think are missing from this framework. Like we can and should do all that. But it gives us a process which gets us started. A few key things it does. It gets us talking to users to understand the root of our challenge. My experience as a teacher was a lot of times we jumped to the solution before we had really investigated what the actual challenge was. Does that sound familiar at all? Like we've decided we need to do a service learning project without talking about why. What is the goal of that, right? And you know, we can try to build a better mousetrap, but if the goal is not just a better mousetrap as a thing, but to keep mice out of our house, there might be a much more efficient way to do that. Like there's actually a little hole right over here, and if I just plug it, I don't need this fancy mousetrap. There's no mice anymore, right? So what is the root of the problem? There's a famous Henry Ford quote about if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, right? And he ended up, of course, inventing the automobile. And the point there is, you don't just ask people at face value. You have to do investigative work. You have to shadow them. You have to observe what they're doing. You have to really understand their needs at a deep level to then be able to identify what the actual challenge is that you're trying to solve for. So I think that's very valuable for us as educators. Second, and this is to my friend's point over here around failing early and failing often, is this notion of ideating, like just, well, I guess my third one maybe more connects to your point, but just making sure we're being generative in these processes, that we're not grabbing the first thing off the shelf, but that we're actually opening space for as many people in our community. Like we're having circles like this in our school and solving these problems together and saying, no idea is a bad idea at first, like let's get them all up and then let's start to sort them out. And there's some very, very good tools in design thinking for the idea sorting. After you've created 1,000 ideas and now you're like overwhelmed, like what are we gonna do? There's some very helpful tools for narrowing in on the ones to try first. And then this notion of experimenting early and iterating often, which is, I guess, what connects most closely to the point about failure, which is like, sometimes we think, okay, I have a network of 20 schools. I have to figure out the perfect thing. Is it project-based learning or problem-based learning or challenge-based learning? And okay, this one has 8 elements, it's 7 elements, and I'm gonna select this one, and now I'm gonna force everyone at all of my schools to do it at once. What about saying, how about 2 teachers at one school trying whichever one of these they're most excited about, and like reporting back and telling us how it goes. And then we start tweaking it and figuring out how to make it better. And eventually some of it may hopefully ripple out to all of these schools. But like, let's just start the experimentation and let's keep changing as we learn and as we get feedback.